this way?
Yes, Your Worship. Staff is bound by the bylaws and regulations that have been adopted by council, and so we must follow those. There is no alternative in this case, and Mr. Matheson could probably respond further.
Just to say, certainly when I reviewed this and looked at the law, and clearly there were other examples of driveways coming off the land. So it's not a matter of is it the end of the world if the council were to approve variance. Just strictly speaking, the bylaw says you can't. And so staff are in that uncomfortable position. Although when one looks at the street, this wouldn't be the first one that sets a dangerous precedent, right? So in this particular case, is it the end of the world if the council will approve this? Probably not, because the street has people backing into it. It just staff felt that they couldn't recommend that in light of the bylaw. So that was the rationale staff raised.
And I think, Councillor Palmer, do you mind if I make a comment first? I think when this came to the council table last time, I voted to deny this. I don't have those stats in front of me, but only because I thought that this driveway was within 50 feet of the corner, and that was my concern. But having said that, I kind of want to hear what each of you have to say around the table. So I'm going to go to Councillor Palmer first, and then to you, Councillor Short.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'm not sure if I should be looking that way. Thanks for the clarification. So the variance request, or actually staff recommendation to deny the variance request was rejected by council. So possibly what can be inferred from that is that council overall, not including me and at least one other person, I believe, were supportive of the variance. That's inferred, it isn't explicit. There was a motion to refer back to staff. Certainly my intention and understanding was for further information on the engineering implications. So specifically what I'm concerned about is 4th Avenue is identified as an arterial route, and there's, I believe, good engineering rationale for not having driveways over a period of time. I think there's another, so that's one, the proximity of that driveway, again, an engineering item, is the proximity to the intersection, whether there's sight lines. So those are the two bases that I was in support of the staff recommendation to deny the variance. And I think I put the motion on the table to refer back to staff because I think we could be making a mistake. At the same time, I recognize and appreciate and possibly even support the idea that that street feels like one that the driveway would not be a big issue. So with that basis, I would like this to go back to engineering before, if the council is inclined to support the variance. For caution and for due process, I'm inclined to have this referred back to engineering in view of the master transportation plan. Because if 4th Avenue continues to be an arterial, I think it would be a mistake to allow the driveway to go into place. But I think it's a valid question whether 4th Avenue really should be an arterial. And as a layperson, it feels like it probably shouldn't be. And so I'm prepared to make that motion to refer to engineering in context of the master transportation plan.
Okay, I'm going to get Mr. Matheson to weigh in, and I just want to say it's 4th Street. Sorry, Palmer, 4th Street, because some of the community will go, where's 4th Avenue?
Yes, yeah, pleasure.
Mr. Matheson, thank you, and I think that the referral is fine. I think there was maybe staff weren't sure what the referral back was for. If it went back to planning, it couldn't be a planning consideration. I think that's caused the confusion, but certainly that clarifies it. And I agree. I think when I looked at it, 4th today, it to me doesn't seem like an arterial. But again, I don't know what the master plan is in the future, and I think Councilor Palmer raised a good issue that at this point, the engineering staff may be able to comment better on the future of what its role as an arterial versus a minor collector or some other standard.
And I think that's pertinent, Councillor, I'll indicate in a moment. My concern along for being a collector is the amount of parking that's already resident parking on that street. And I'm wondering if having a driveway is better than having all the cars parked along both sides of the street. So that's kind of my question. So having it go back to engineering might be the prudent choice, Councillor Palmer. You want to respond, and then Councillor Elliott wants to say.
Or I could put the motion on the table that we refer back to engineering in context of the massive transportation to provide clarity on the long-term use of the Fourth Avenue.
Okay, good. Councillor Elliott, did you have a comment?
A couple things. I think when that Fourth Street was designated an arterial was before the roundabout, and effectively it becomes a one-way exit onto the circuit. So traffic going both ways is excessive. Roads are typically wider than most residential zones, and we had a real battle about snowplow and congestion of traffic, and the whole argument about getting people off the road to make the snowplowing efficient. So it seems like we're going backwards, making an obvious choice. It's get the car off the traffic road. It is a wide street. It doesn't detract from the neighborhood. There's half the street has parking on the front lawn and half doesn't. So really, is this an issue or are we just making it an issue? And I think common sense would dictate it isn't a busy road. Third, second, and first are 3 times more busier than fourth. So fourth isn't an arterial in any
Just for emergency vehicles with their access, but yeah.
But even then, the emergency they only go wide open, they don't come in, right? So it just doesn't make sense as an arterial.
Okay, and so my question to you is, Councillor Palmer would like to refer back to engineering for a formal
I
response.
think it's just common sense. Put somebody in front of us and then delay it further seems to be an excessive step to me.
Okay. Councillor Charlotte, sorry, I forgot your hand up and I started.
Yeah, just maybe a point of order. Just because I got a motion on the table, can be seconded? And
Sure.
I don't think it was just.
Do you want to second that motion? Councillor Charlotte wants to second the motion. Do you want to speak to that motion?
I would like to, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Councillor Palmer said. I think that it is prudent to, in light of master planning, master transportation plan is in process right now, for us to arbitrarily make a decision. As much as I can understand Councillor Elliott, it does seem like common sense. This is an opportunity to just hold off for a short period of time so that we can make that decision in light of the master transportation plan without us deciding what is and is not the best choice for getting vehicles and people around our community.
So even if engineering were to weigh in before they completed a master transportation plan to give some input and credibility to this, would you be okay with that, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Sherman?
I would, if the engineering department knows more about this topic than we do, in my opinion. So if they were to weigh in and say that, yes, this seems like a logical next step, this will probably fit with the master transportation plan, I would trust the experts on what they said with that. I'm also satisfied with it being part of a conversation as the master transportation plan. Parking in this community in various different rural areas and different community roads has become a major problem over the past years. It's not going away. I think it needs a fulsome discussion as part of that master transportation plan. I believe it is part of the scope of the project. And this fits in smoothly with that, rather than us discussing a one-off, let's have a discussion.
Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I just worry that if we do that, then we're like really putting a delay on this person's, like, I feel like we could do both, right? Acknowledge that there's an issue here, but then also allow for the variance in this case. So I'm curious what kind of precedent it would set, like what kind of, is it something that everybody on Fourth would want? Like, I'm just not sure. Maybe the director of planning has some insight on that.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Palmer.
So, mind addressing the concerns here and Councillor Elliott's as well. So, in my mind, the reason we send this back to engineering is if what seems logical to us, that doesn't belong to be, shouldn't be an arterial, and engineering can come back, and then the next person that wants a driveway won't have to go through this whole, because again, staff will make a recommendation to deny, and doing this sort of circular thing. So I think it is really the best thing to get it back to engineering. If engineering sees that this is an obvious thing, it's as obvious to them as it is, they can say, okay, well, either an adjustment to the bylaw or whatever is appropriate. I think the risk of approving the variance is that we find out something after the fact and say, there is good rationale behind this, and we've made it worse. The other is we're trying to do staff engineering in this context. We're trying to do engineering work, and so if we're making engineering decisions, as to where stop signs should go, where that kind of thing, I think we're making mistakes. So let's let staff's work and with this motion of referral.
Okay. So before I ask for a vote, just for clarification, Mr. Matheson, if we vote on this in favor of going back to engineering, that's it. We don't need to vote on the other motion that we started this. Is that correct? All right. So, Councillor.
So initially it came to council for approval, and the planning department had recommended going against approval. Just not done on.
Because that's what the bylaw stands.
Bylaw and more, it already had sort of planning and the engineering stamp or review of the proposal, I would think. And I don't know for sure, but typically they would have evaluated this request, said yea or nay, and the planning department and the engineering, I'm assuming the engineering said nay, and that's what they came to us for. We said, this is right, it doesn't make sense, all the other things don't fit. The bylaw was established for a two-way street that was very, a typical street, and this is not the case. And there may be one or two neighbors who might be upset. That probably prompted the uproar about backing out. But is it a real problem? Is it something that's really detrimental to that neighbor? And I had a tough time with it. So engineering's already had the 2 cents in it. They told us not to go with it, and we would have approved it, and we wanted more information. They now come back and said, let's let it go with the variance, and now we're going to put it back to engineering again. So that seems to be what we're doing. So
Is this where you want to get commented, just go back to engineering or just to your department and planning?
To your worship, I wanted to just highlight that this has been through engineering. We worked together on this, and that engineering in your report that came from April 13th has the comments from engineering on this. And I know that Director Black is on this call, and it might be worthwhile having a conversation with him because they are bound by the subdivision and servicing bylaw just like we are. And if we're going to change our technique, we need to actually go through the revision of the subdivision and servicing bylaw to deal with this because it has a domino effect. We are looking at this in the zoning bylaw because we're addressing this when it comes to our proposal for carriage houses or carriage suites and garden suites. So we are aware of this issue and are working on that in the zoning bylaw to try to address some of these concerns. But I just offer that Mr. Black is available and it has been to engineering, and the comments are in the report where they have objections to this, and that it's a major route in the south end of town, and keeping access points to a minimum length helps manage traffic flow, and the alley is plowed, and therefore the year-round access should not be an issue from the alley.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wade. Mr. Black, any comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have no further comments. Director Wade has summarized our department's concerns regarding this application, and we have, at this point in time, no other direction to provide. Regarding the Transportation Master Plan and arterial collector routes, most definitely these are considerations that will come through the transportation master planning work, and we then can evaluate our typical road sections, what we need for access, And I would like to also point out that 4th Street was a one-way onto the new roundabout in order to provide access from emergency services to the south end of town. And so it is an important route for us at this time in the community, and I doubt that is going to change as long as the roundabout is where it is. And we need the access, 4th Street, to gain access to the southern part of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. So I'll go back to you, councillors, with the motion that you put on the table about sending it back to engineering and master transportation plan. Do you still want to do that? We're hearing what Ms. Wade and Mr. Black have weighed in at this point. How do you feel?
Can we have the motion read back? Just because I think how the wording is make a difference.
Okay, so
This one.
The one that's on the table right now.
the motion that's on the table, Ms. Floyd, Ms. Rousseau, could one of you read the motion back to us, please?
My apologies. I was not doing the minutes. Give me one moment and I will see if Jolene has the motion.
Thank you.
Your worship, that the application be referred back to staff in consideration of the master transportation plan.
Good. You do that, Mr. Council Plummer?
That's about engineering, refer back to engineering.
Yeah. So, I think there's a question, and maybe could I put a question to the director of engineering? So, Mr. Black, on 4th Avenue, I understood what you've just stated. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that it seems like that this should, from engineering's perspective, continue to be an arterial in that there isn't other reasonable possible alternatives. Would that be accurate?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, though I cannot speak for the emergency services, I do understand that the design of the roundabout was in consideration of access and timely response to emergencies at the south end of town needed that one-way access onto the roundabout. And therefore, 4th Street will be and always should be an access route for emergency services, which then makes its designation an arterial to provide that service.
So, Councillor Palmer and Mr. Black, so in my experience with emergency services, 4th Street is the direct route out of the fire hall to get them quickest access to the highway or up into Arrow Heights or even Southside, because it's direct. There's no corners to go around, especially when they've got the ladder truck out, that sort of thing. It's just direct to the roundabout and out. And I think that's what Mr. Black is trying to relate to. Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I'm just curious, if it were, well, it is a quick access out, does it make sense to have cars on the street as parking where kids can run out between the cars? Or wouldn't it make more sense to have them off in a driveway? And that's as simple as I can make it. I mean, why would you put cars on the street, narrow the street, and lots more on hidden obstacles for kids or whatever can come out through? I'm just trying to understand.
Yep, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Shane.
So, near Sulz, I'm a little bit troubled that we are trying to do engineering, and engineering is saying this is the way it should be. So, I would like to, following Councillor Charlette's call the question on that we refer this to the master transportation plan. Then there'll be other transportation engineers that specialize in this can review this particular matter. And then, because I am very reticent to make a change in engineering based on our lay understanding.
I'll call the question. So thank you for your comment. So all those in favor of sending this back to engineering to weigh in regarding the master transportation plan and driveways off of 4th Street. If I got that correct?
It's pretty close.
Pretty close.
That's the agenda.
Okay, so I'll ask the question. All those in favor?
Can I just comment on that? I don't understand why, they've already mentioned that they're going to do that. Like, both directors mentioned that it's part of their work plan, and they're aware that the zoning bylaw needs it to be changed. So what is this really accomplishing?
Well, councillors want to send it back for weigh-in on the master transportation plan. Councillor
I'm
Sherlock?
actually going to vote against the motion.
Okay. All right.
And does it have any impact on this applicant?
Also,
Pardon?
Just prolongs
Oh,
it.
I see. So they're not like for sure not going to get the variance. I see.
Okay,
Okay, well, if
so,
that's the case, if it gives the applicant time, then I'll vote in favor of that. But
So Mayor Sulz, just because Councillor Sherlock says she's going to vote against that motion, that's kind of a curiosity, so even though I called the question, I'm curious to hear. Just
I think we heard clearly from Director Black and engineering that if we refer it back to engineering department, we're probably gonna get the same result. And the master transportation plan is probably not gonna change the design of the roundabout. If it was designed to be an emergency arterial route, it makes sense why it would be. I think it makes sense to manage that arterial road as we manage arterial roads. If that gets changed, as Councillor Elliott has suggested, that maybe it's best to get cars off the road and onto parking on lots versus parking on the street, then so be it. In this case, if I remember the report correctly, it was moving the parking space from the alley to the street. So we're not taking another car off the road in this case. So I think it's a moot point in this instance. And I think it's better for the proponent to have a clear answer rather than getting it referred again. So I'm happy to let it stand. I second the motion. I wanted to have the conversation, but I'm going to vote against for those reasons.
okay, so I'm going to go, any other further comments on the motion on the table?
I'm also going to vote against it.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion on the table? Yep. Note Councillor Palmer's in favor. All those opposed? Note that the balance of council is opposed. Now do we have to go back to the original motion?
There is no
Okay.
There's an alternative, I believe. There's no motion, no, there's no alternative recommendation.
Okay. That's good.
Essentially.
Okay, so right now, Ms. Wade, can you just clarify, this was originally denied approval so that they couldn't have the driveway at the front, is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
And so there was no other recommendation, of course, from staff. So it sits as being denied now, or is there an option for council to change that? So Mr. Matusi, I'll ask that.
So-
Yes, Your Worship, staff aren't recommending it, but there is an option in the report to allow staff to pass a motion to approve it with the appropriate conditions attached.
Okay. So, Councillor Ryan.
Sorry, I'm just a little bit confused. I thought that the denial, the recommended denial was denied. So doesn't that mean that then?
So that it was approved that they got their
I thought
parking lot? So is that clarification, Ms. Wade, on that? Did
Yes.
they get their parking spot?
So through your worship, so what happened is because staff denied it, put forward a recommendation for denial, and that was defeated by council. That means that right now they have, it's the denial has been defeated. And so now there needs to be some direction from council in your discussion as to whether the option that is put forward, which staff cannot make as a recommendation because it's not in our legislation, but council has the option to vary the driveway if they so wish by doing an approval instead of a denial.
Okay, so pardon me on that. So because we denied it, I thought they automatically would get their variance permit because we're denying the bylaw. But that's not the case. So now we have to make another motion to approve if that's the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I will put a motion forward as stated in the package, is the same motion, I believe, from the April 13th meeting, that development permit be denied at 305 4th Street, blah, 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 as outlined in our package. I would put that forward if there was a seconder.
And so is there a seconder for that? So by denying the motion, yes.
And maybe Mr. Petrucci can weigh in on this, because that motion was already defeated. I don't believe we can bring it back. It's why, and I think that's why they have the, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of why the motion on the agenda package is to approve the variance to permit. And if we then defeat that motion, then the variance permit would officially be denied, and this.
Okay, so council can pass a motion outlining approval based on.
But if we don't pass it, we defeat it,
Then it's
then it
done.
denies it.
Okay.
But it has to be a different motion than.
So it has to be a different
I will
motion.
put
So
that on
motion that's in the package to
to
approve.
approve it, yes.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Brown.
So I will be voting against this. And the reason is we are trying to do engineering at the council table. And so I will be in opposition to this motion. And I think that's probably enough been said on this thing.
Okay. Any other Councillor Ryan, do you have a comment?
No, I will also be voting against this.
Okay. Anyone else have any comment? Okay, all, Councillor Elliott.
No, I'm trying to understand. So we denied the denial,
Yep,
and now we're trying to approve a variance
yep. So if you approve the variance, then they get their driveway.
to get the driver.
So if you don't approve it, then they do not.
And Councilor Ryan is not approving the driveway. So you denied the denial, and now you're not approving accepting of the driveway.
Well, that's okay, that motion's under the,
I'm just trying to
It's from
understand.
the original denial was at the April 13th meeting. Because that motion was already brought to the table, we cannot do it again. It can only be brought once. So that's where our only option to bring this back to the table today is to have a motion to approve the variance, but then we can defeat it. We can vote against it if that's how we choose. We can also vote for it. But that's what it's.
So the gist is they just want an access from 4th Street, parking on 4th Street.
they want to take their driveway out of the back alley because they want more room in their backyard.
Well, actually, I think there's a residence and a second rental suite there long term. You know what I'm saying? So there's limited parking, it's already utilized. So I just think we've been pushing for density and we're trying to find parking and we're just now making it more covered.
All right. So any other comments? I will ask the question. So those who raise in favor are approving to put a parking spot on 4th Street for this residence. So all those in favor? That Councillor Elliott is in favor. All those opposed? Note that the balance of council is opposed. Okay, so this motion is done. Correct? We're going to move on.
So can I ask, what really happened there, right? So they can't park in the back. They wanted to park in the front and we denied them with this whole debate. And now we're put a motion, can they park in the front? And we deny that.
They can't park off the street on the front of there.
So we just wasted half our time for nothing. What do we accomplish there?
We finished the conversation.
What?
We finished the conversation about it rather than referring it back to staff again.
So what happened? So the proponent is looking for parking off street.
They are looking to move their access to their parking. Because right now they have parking in the back alley. The back alley is plowed, it's year-round access.
And all along 4th Street, that's been the intention, is to try and get the parking off. So I lived on 4th Street further down and we were denied access to our property from the front because of course it was a busier road. And that's beyond the roundabout, and definitely was busy, but we had access off the back. So when I lived there, I took my driveway that was in the front and moved it to the back. so that it was safer
So
for.
we should have effectively denied the first proposition, agree or voted in favor with the county. So this is exactly what we've done after we should refer back to. All right, yes, I'm trying to
Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you, councillors. Announcements from the mayor. I just want to say we're into grad season, and I just want to congratulate the graduates of 2021. It's been a hard year for them in the previous grad class of 2020, but for those who are graduating this year, from all of us on council and in the community of Revelstoke, congratulations. Thank you for persevering, for being able to get your schooling in and to be able to graduate. So thank you from us, and congratulations as you move on into your adult life. All right, we're going to move on to delegations and presentations. We have Revelstoke Mountain Resort here, who is going to do a presentation for us.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council and staff, for the opportunity to provide an update on the golf course and the development plans for Revelstoke Mountain Resort. Is the presentation up on your screen?
Yes, it is, Mr. Brownlie.
That's great. I appreciate it. So, yeah, my name is Dave Brownlie. I'm the president of the Mountain Division for Northland Properties, and joining me today is Ben Cowan-Dewar, the CEO and founder of Cabot Golf. Since our last update in November of 2020, significant progress has been made despite the challenges we've all been dealing with through this pandemic. I know we had a very different winter, but we were very pleased to be able to operate and provide a great experience for our local and regional guests this winter. And I'd like to take the opportunity to publicly thank our employees at the resort and the community of Revelstoke for their support throughout this challenging period. We're certainly very excited to see the opening up of travel, first within BC here today, and then hopefully Canada for the rest of the summer. And if everything goes according to plan, we'll be able to welcome our U.S. and international guests this winter. So we're pretty optimistic about the future. So the first slide here, I just wanted to highlight our overall plan for the base area at the resort, which was presented in November of 2020. And as you can see, a key amenity in the creation of our four-season resort is the Cabot Pacific Golf Course. And I welcome Ben Cowan-Dewar, our partner in the golf development, to provide an update on the golf course progress. Ben?
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Mayor, thank you, Council and staff. It's an honor to get to chat with you. I'm sorry it's on a screen as we've all adapted to this year, but I look forward to meeting you in person. So, as Dave said, I founded Cabot a little over 17 years ago. And as we've grown from our rather humble beginnings in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, to now expand to St. Lucia, and the announcement last fall of our project in your municipality, we couldn't be more excited to be a part of the fabric of Revelstoke. And I went and looked at, as a lover of skier, perhaps more than golf, I first went and looked at the property about 3 years ago, and what I had said was that most mountain golf, the land was so steep, it really yields really good golf. Our two courses in Nova Scotia are considered two of the best in both the country and the world, and so I didn't have really high expectations for the land. And I think I walked the property and took in the beautiful views across the river valley that you all know so well. I think I couldn't have been more excited and really felt like this was an opportunity to build one of the great golf courses, not just in the country, but really in the world. And the two great exemplars of mountain golf are Banff and Jasper, and the site echoes that. And so engaged Rod Whitman, who's actually lives in British Columbia, who was the architect of our first course in Nova Scotia Cabot Links, and working closely with Dave and the team at RMR, came up with a plan that we think is both really exciting from a golf standpoint, and I think really helps elevate, summer offering against your already amazing summer offering, and obviously the terrific winter offering. And so, I couldn't be more excited about Revelstoke. I've spent a fair amount of time in the community. I recently was the speaker at the Chamber's lunch, and was able to get a lot of feedback and a few questions, and I think the feedback has been really, really terrific. And I think as we look at press, Globe and Mail, and the golf magazines in the U.S., Golf Magazine, Golf Digest around the announcement, I certainly felt that. But I think the concerns that were raised were really largely tied to environmental ones. And so I'd maybe just share with you that in Nova Scotia, where both of our courses have achieved the highest Audubon certification of any courses in Canada for their environmental stewardship, which both goes to how we deal with the environment in the day-to-day practices, but also in the construction. And I think part of why, my first comments about the land being so severe is if you have to alter the land significantly, you end up moving a lot of earth, and it always will look manufactured. And so to be able to find a site that has such great natural contour, and an architect like Rod who takes his cues from the land rather than enforcing his will, that's where it starts. But we really have taken an unbelievably proactive approach on the environmental side, and it's a huge part of both our brand and who we are, and one we'll continue to bring to Revelstoke. And so obviously looking forward to getting going in some form and fashion shortly on the golf course construction, and think that we can make a really, really positive impact both on the community and the tourism offering. And I would echo Dave's comments. I've been the chair of Destination Canada, the federal crown corporation that markets Canadian tourism over the past 4 years. I've seen the rebound globally in leisure travel, and it's been phenomenal, and particularly in places, and Revelstoke to me is an unbelievable tourism destination today, and I think is one that I'm extremely confident will continue to grow and fulfill all of your dreams. So really a pleasure just to get to tell you a little bit. Don't want to take up too much time, and wanted to say thank you very much, and look forward to working closely with you and the community members and achieving something that I think will be really special for decades and hopefully even centuries, as Banff's now over 100 years old to come. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, thanks, Ben. Certainly with the golf course development and really setting up the subdivision for future development at Revelstoke, we have a number of commitments that are sort of in progress at Revelstoke, largely hopefully starting shortly before the end of the summer, but over $10 million of infrastructure, and this is the short list. From the reservoir of 2.3 megaliters of water, which will really support the resort well into the future, but significant road and intersection improvements. I think the roundabout was brought forward to council last meeting, working with Mackenzie Village in the city, the Camosi realignment and decommissioning, and then Camosi upgrades that'll really take the upgrades right to the resort. And then with the heli hotel and employee housing, we'll be actually completing the other side of the roadway. And then with the Cabot Hotel and Cabot Residences, that full roadway with Valley Trail lighting will be complete, and a great great entry and exit from the resort, but also a tremendous connection to the city, which is obviously super important as we go forward. Just some of our priorities I wanted to highlight for you. And first of all, under construction is the Heli Hotel, and it's a slow start, but it's 154 rooms with conference space for over 500 people. So we're really excited to get that going. But that is our number one priority. Then the golf course, which we hope to get underway shortly. We've been working with the province through our various approvals, and we're really at the 1 yard line. We're going through a process with the First Nations referral process that we need to work through, and we're really at the end of that process. But there's quite a significant trading area with many bands, as I'm sure Mayor and Council are aware of. And we're really almost through that process and hope to be through that within the next couple of weeks, which will set us up to start to move forward. As everybody at council and the community is aware, our commitment to staff housing, our first building is 90 rooms, which will house, and I'll just show you a little picture of our first building. It's the first of 3, and it's 67 2-bedroom apartments and 23 1-bedroom apartments that will house approximately 180 employees. And we're really excited to get that underway. The building, the application has been in. We've got some feedback and we're ready to resubmit and work with the city to get that underway with the goal of a sort of an 18 to 24 month construction period to get that up and going. And then the subsequent to the Heli Hotel, the golf course, and the employee housing, we've got kind of our three next projects are the Cabot Hotel, the Cabot residences, and some golf townhomes. And those are just the artist rendering. And, we're pretty well detailed into the process, but those are the renderings of, kind of the product that we hope to bring to market very shortly. But we're confident once we get through the golf course approval and the subdivision process, then these are the projects that we see coming in behind to take the resort, I think, to the level that ourselves and the community anticipated back in 2007, 2008 when it was launched. So we're really excited on a go-forward basis. So thank you. This was just to provide an update to Mayor and Council, and we look forward to bringing these projects here as we get through our approvals with the ministry, the provincial government, and of course working with city staff. So thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Dave, and thank you, Ben, for being present. I'm just going to ask if council has any questions of either of you before you sign off. Councillors, any comments or questions? Councillor Palmer, Councillor Gillette.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Thank you for the presentation. It's really great to have the visuals and the concept there. I do have some questions, Dave, on timelines, specifically, I guess, on the reservoir, when you anticipate that to be online, because I think there's some other, some of the stratas that are kind of dependent on that. And then I also have questions on the timeline of the golf course, what your ambition is, and then also on the housing development. But yeah, just a sense of that. Just give you were saying, you used the word very soon. That's different in the developer's world than the layperson, I think.
Yeah, well, first of all, with regard to the reservoir, we've been working diligently with your engineering department, and actually the reservoir has been designed, and we're out to tender. So we're in the process of soliciting feedback from various contractors, and in the process of also finalizing all of our bonding commitments with the city. And with reasonable pricing coming back, we hope to be in the ground shortly and have the reservoir ideally completed before the snow falls this winter.
Okay, and interesting. Reasonable pricing. That's a scary comment. And then on I think you mentioned like the development, the townhomes or the units, the development associated with the golf course. you see that following or going in tandem with the golf course, that development, or is it sort of market driven?
Well, for the number one thing is we've got to move through the golf course construction approval process, which is contingent upon the provincial approvals. And there's, in particular, there's a Section 11 in-stream works approval, and then there's a riparian area also approval, and Department of Fishery approval. And those are all actually sequenced, and they're actually all, we've been in contact with them quite regularly over the last, really over the last 3 weeks in particular. And what they're all waiting for is to get sign off on our First Nations referral process. And it has been, just a bit of a challenging time, as you know, with what's happened with the residential schools and ultimately getting the appropriate feedback and dialogue back and forth. But we think we're moving through that process. We're in pretty good shape. We're actually hosting the basically the Adams Lake, the Little Shuswap, those various bands up at the resort on Monday, and we expect that through the following week to 10 days, we should be through the referral process, and then the authorization from the provincial government will come. And then we can start move forward on the golf course, which also includes the infrastructure, which I outlined earlier, and working with the city on the bonding requirements for that and getting that ultimately going. And in an ideal world, and I know there's a lot of requests coming into the city as we speak, but we'd really like to bring those 3 priority projects forward, at the end of the summer or into the fall, once we've got sort of the golf course and infrastructure approvals behind us.
Thank you. Then my last question is on the golf course. With the golf course that we have with Revelstoke, can you give us your perspective on the impacts of Revelstoke's golf course? It's a question that comes out there, and I get different sort of rhetoric, I guess, around that. But could you make comments on how you see the impact on our existing golf course?
Yeah, I think Ben will, answer that question.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And in one of my visits with your former mayor, I did tour the course and know it well, and know its beautiful setting on the river, and sort of understand the dynamics of it. So I would say impacts, frankly, I would see as positive, i.e. you would gain more golfers. In terms of when we built Cabot Links in Inverness, Nova Scotia, there was no golf in the immediate community, but it was there was a local course that had a significant local membership that was just north of the community of Inverness, and there were similar concerns, i.e. would the competition dilute. And I think what we've proven in Nova Scotia and what we're setting out to do in Revelstoke is to draw perhaps more of a destination golf traveler who's seeking out course. I think a bit of a different product segment and a bit of a different customer, although I think it incrementally will bring golfers. So if you look at Nova Scotia, where we would bring, quite sort of thousands, tens of thousands of new tourists to a region that were coming previously, that's really who we're sort of targeting with this product offering. So I think you're going to find new golfers into the community that'll overflow in versus fighting for the same customer.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Charlotte, do you have a comment or a question?
That's a good comment. I appreciate the presentation. It's always nice to be kept in the loop on things. I also appreciate hearing that the approvals are coming along smoothly and that they are quite robust. It is a very delicate, sensitive area in our valley. And I know there is quite a bit of concern from local residents about the riparian areas. So I'm glad to hear that's going smoothly. I'm also grateful to hear of the patience when it comes to First Nations and our neighbors, because it has been a challenging time this year for all of us, but especially for those of Indigenous descent. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I heard an update on that temporary housing in Johnson Heights, and I'm wondering if there's an update on that.
Mr. Brownlie, you want to weigh in on workforce housing at all, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I can provide an update. Obviously, we definitely need some temporary housing as we move forward with our construction program. Unfortunately, what we were looking to go forward with at Johnson Heights really didn't make a lot of sense in terms of the commitment for the time frame, and so we're actively out there looking for alternative sites, and we're really narrowing that down. We think we have found something. It is outside of the city jurisdiction, so it's not something that will be coming before council that I'm aware of, but it should provide, not only temporary housing for our construction workers, but also the opportunity to expand as we continue our program going forward.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Any comments, Councillor Ryan, Councillor Elliott? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. It was a great presentation. I represent council to the local golf course, and word from that realm is that they are excited about the new course, and they see it as a complement to driving business their way as well. So people, destination golf, they come into town, having one or two options is a good thing. So I think the local club is in support. So that's good news. And just on the time Tim mentioned, once the land is cleared, once everything is ready and approvals are in place, how long before they're golfing? Is it 5 years, 4 years, 3? What's the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think obviously subject to the approvals and what we think is reasonable this year, what we would see is a full year of construction in 22 and 23 with grow-in occurring in 23. And so as we know, because you have such great skiing in the winter, we're not growing grass with snow on the ground. So we just need to let the grass mature enough and have enough of a season. So right now, I'd say we're on track to golf in 2024. And some of that is a bit weather dependent on how 22 and 23 grow and the growing insofar as, I'd be reluctant to say it's June 1st, but I think, golf in 2024. So about 3 years time. Assuming all of the permits come through as we hope and believe they will this year, and we get a head start on the clearing and are able to sort of set ourselves up for a really good late spring start next year.
Just on the current hotel construction, so that is due for completion. That is more for David, I imagine. What's your time on that one? When do you foresee that opening?
Yeah, that it's actually we've unfortunately we had a bit of a slower start than we had hoped for this year, just because of really the supply chain, the backup of the supply chain. So that's probably put us off our original date. So we're probably moving forward to similar to play on the golf course for the for the hotel opening as well. So 23, 24.
And the staff account would be a touch before that.
Yeah. The staff accommodation is again a lot simpler building and a lot shorter construction time frame. So that's actually not a bad place to be. Obviously, bringing in the employee housing before the hotel requirements for staff.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Just one more question, just for clarity. The man camp, just to confirm, will not be going in Johnson Heights. Some of the media will be asking that question, so I'm just confirming that is correct.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brownlie. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate both your time. and for presenting to council and to the community. Good luck as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
All right, council, we're going to move on to item number 10A, unfinished business, 606 Victoria Road, council committee recommendations. Mr. Matheson, how do we want to approach that? We want to look at the recommendations that the committee has put forward in our council package.
Yes, Your Worship, point by point, or if there's any questions, certainly to you, Councillor Palmer, who on that committee will lead off. Okay.
So, thank you, Mayor Sulz. So I think we might as well just dive into it. I'll put the first motion on the table and we can talk about that. The staff addressed the issue of temporary structures in the zoning bylaw with reference to the new provisions of the draft building bylaw.
Second for the motion, Councillor Ryan.
I'll speak to the motion.
All right, thank you.
Basically, and I think this is somewhat of a question for staff to make sure that there's clarity going back to staff. The question of the temporary building, looking to the future, making sure that it's very clear in the zoning bylaw or the draft building bylaw, those two both are coming forward. We had a little bit of dialogue last council meeting. And so I think there needs to be very clear understanding when and if temporary buildings are acceptable, similar to this. So it seems to me that, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in the building bylaw, talked about 1 year, and I think that is a reasonable approach for temporary buildings. Otherwise, they should be permanent buildings and go through the whole process. So that's the intent, and if there was any sort of, I guess staff can always come back later anyway, but if there's any clarification on what the intent is there, but I think it's fairly straightforward.
Thank you. Any comments from any of the councillors? Councillor Sherwood.
I think it's a good idea, and I agree. I think having some sort of delineation of what qualifies as a temporary structure. I would just comment on, it'd be interesting to see how that jives with the idea of a temporary use permit and how that interacts. Not an engineer, happy to leave it to staff.
Great. Mr. Matheson, any comments regarding that?
Yeah, Your Worship, one's really talking about whether a building is there temporarily. Temporary use is whether or not it's more use related,
Right.
not building related. Right? So you can temporarily use a building for a lot of different uses. So they're two different animals. I think sometimes they get confused.
Right.
It could be overlap, but generally one is a use, one is a structure. And that's why one's a building bylaw, the other is a zoning bylaw. And I think the connection is to put the two together to alleviate some of the confusion.
Yeah, and so that might be nice if the intent of this is to clarify that definition, with separation of the two, so that it's clearly this is use, this is building, and never the two shall meet.
Yeah, and I think that in itself is clear, but it will be clear as we move forward. So I have one question for Ms. Wade. As far as action items, you're comfortable with what you're hearing?
Through your worship, we already have addressed the temporary structures in the proposed changes to the zoning bylaw and the temporary building in the draft bylaw, so they're already underway.
All right, thank you very much. So any further comments from council? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Councillor Palmer, do you want to go on with all of them? Go on number 2.
So I move that staff ensure development outcomes at 606 Victoria Road comply with all provisions contained in the development permit DP 2020-23.
Second for the motion. Councillor Ryan, discussion on the motion. Will you speak, please?
Yeah, I'll speak to the motion. So specifically, and I know staff have already been working with the developer of 606. But there still continues to be some infractions, specifically on the parking spaces designated, and that's having impact in the surrounding areas. There's some questions around the portable washroom. It's not explicit. I don't know if there's something that can be done, but making sure that there's compliance with that. And then the landscaping, in ensuring that all the requirements in the development permit are adhered to strictly moving forward. So that's the intent behind this motion.
Ms. Wade, you have your hand up.
Oh, I was just going to let your worship and council know that I know that staff was just out on a site inspection last week and is regularly checking up on things.
Great, thank you. Any further comments on motion number 2 on the table from councillors? I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Carry on, Mr. Palmer, please.
So I move that the zoning bylaw review address the use, location, and aesthetics of CCAN containers.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Sherlett. For the discussion, will you speak to it? Councillor Palmer, please.
So it's, I think it just talks about the CCAN. The various communities have different tolerance for CCAN structures and where we're going. So this is to the zoning bylaw, take a look at that. This may end up being more discussion with council in the future, but having clarity of what we're doing with CCAN. So that's the intent behind that, whether this kind of structure would be acceptable in any case.
Okay. Any further comments by councillors? Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Councillor Palmer, item number 4, please.
Okay, I move that the permitted uses and definitions related to the industrial zones are updated and appropriately categorized as light, medium, and heavy industrial, considering impacts that permitted uses may have on the surrounding or adjacent areas. The goal should be to reduce the land use conflicts between adjacent uses. Those uses contributing to noise nuisance should be contained within permanent structures in the light and medium zones.
Seconded by Councillor Rind. Any discussion? Councillor Palmer, do you want to speak to this as well, please?
So this is addressing the question of light versus medium, and the way the zoning bylaw is there, it just created ambiguity. So it's getting that clarity of what is light and medium and heavy industrial. I think the heavy is a little bit clearer. And also contained within this is sensitivity to the surrounding areas. And then the other one that is an important aspect is that noise in the light and medium industrial zones be contained within buildings and not on the outside. So that's the intent.
Mr. Matheson, yeah, Your Worship, like many of these, we could speak to, but staff are well aware. The wording of that zoning bylaw, the conditions of use, and the problems it creates. So I think you welcome that.
Ms. Wade, you have your hand up.
Yes, Your Worship, I just wanted to echo what Mr. Matheson said. Staff are very aware of this issue. So we've been working with it for a couple of years now and have that already on our list for our comprehensive zoning bylaw update, and totally concur with this. And thank you for that.
Okay. Mr. Palmer, further comment?
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think we recognize that staff are working on this, but this is making it very clear that this is a very important issue moving forward.
Thank you. Any other comments from councillors regarding item number 4? All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Moving on to number 5, if you could bring that forward, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I move that staff review the noise bylaw with a particular focus on nuisances created in industrial areas.
Second for the motion. Councillor Sherlett. Discussion on the motion. Will you weigh in, Councillor Palmer, please?
I think this is probably self-evident to one of the staff will just take a look at that. I think there's some pros and cons about how we can measure noise complaints. I think that's one of the problems with this. There isn't a reference, for example, to decibels. Should it be there? And so that the noise bylaw, just taking a look at that so that we have consistency of understanding what's acceptable and not acceptable in the industrial areas.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wright, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. Any questions from any other councillors?
I would say that was in this particular case irksome and troubling for all the neighbors, but it is very tough to monitor noise and control noise in industrial zone. It's what industrial, in light industrial, you might have a bit more discretion what's offensive. That's what I think the cause of the main concern here is that this was louder than expected in a light industrial zone. But I mean, we have a load of things we can talk about noise. We talk motorbikes roar down the middle of the street, we have a train track in the middle. We go into a whole bunch of things. It's not just for this particular zone. We can talk like a noise nuisance bylaw all over throughout the city. Maybe that's something we need.
Yeah, and so we'll be discussing this with our council.
Yeah, I agree with Council Elliott. This needs to be a robust, fulsome conversation with the amount of people who have moved to our community over the last year in particular. I think having a clear understanding of what is and is not acceptable and where that is acceptable. I appreciate that the previous motion did discuss the difference between industrial zones in industrial areas and industrial zones that are next to residential areas, because then there's a big difference. So if the wording can clearly articulate that without creating more confusion, I think this will be a win. So looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Okay. Any worship of I just I think this really is also sharing the noise bylaw is in alignment with the zoning bylaw. Right now it's there are loggerheads at some of these points, so it's really multi-aligned as well.
Great, thank you for that comment. Any further comments on that? All those in favor? The motion is carried unanimously. Councilor Palmer, item number 6, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So finally, move that the interim CAO create a policy for council consideration, or if necessary, a bylaw amendment respecting the referral of minor development permit applications located adjacent to industrial zones to the Advisory Planning Commission for consideration of potential development impacts to adjacent uses.
And that actually it said that residential zones, Councillor,
Okay.
industrial zones. So,
Right.
Second for that motion, Councillor Chouette. And Councillor Palmer, will you again give comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sulz. So the intent here is that when if situations like this occur in the future, that they would basically automatically be referred to the APC for more consideration. That's the intent.
So when you say like this,
Go ahead.
is it just the novelty of the proposal or the novelty of the project, or what exactly like this does it mean to you?
So I think it's quite possibly it's just a policy thing through a council policy stating that when there is minor development permit applications adjacent to industrial residential zones, that those would be referred to the Advisory Planning Commission. The one concern that I have with this is, does it put additional delay on moving things ahead? That's the one sort of potential drawback. But I think that the bigger, what this does is clearly say, okay, this is something that goes to APC and they can review it. I think would have mitigated in this case the problems that occurred.
So would that be a commercial entity, or like, I guess the problem here is that it's total contrary to the residential 50 feet away.
So I get Mr. Matheson to weigh in just for.
Yours really the whole discussions around the interface with residential. So in most cases, this would be an industrial use. Or you might look at the commercial zone. There theoretically could be something, but I think our focus was really that interface, going back to the sensitivity to something around the commercial zone. But as the company could be as simple as policy, but really just provide some support to staff so that when you're in those areas, it's you get that additional community input. Although you might do it normally, but when you're in that interface area, it's really important to do.
Can I clarify for you, Councillor Elliott? Okay. Any further comments from councillors? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Sorry. You opposed?
Debated.
Okay. Councillor Ryan is opposed, this result, and the other councillors are in favor. That's it for 606 Victoria Road. I want to thank Mr. Matheson and Councillor Palmer for discussing this. I sat with them and it was a very good discussion. We narrowed things down and that what brought the recommendations forward so that we can move forward when we have these sorts of interface developments going on. So thank you again, and thank you, Councillor Palmer, for bringing this to the forefront. All right, so we're going to move on to item number 11A, staff reports. This is housekeeping regarding enhancement signage, economic opportunity fund. Ms. Braun, are you here? Do you want to weigh in on this? Or do we just want to put these motions on the table?
Through your worship, you can go ahead and put it on the table.
All right. Someone want to make the first motion, please?
Yeah, that Victoria Road and Hanford signage policy 8-22 be rescinded.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Sherlett, discussion on the motion. This is basically rescinding the enhanced signage where we actually rented the signage out for commercial ventures. And because we're now going through the wayfinding signage program, those will be used to be directional signs. Is that correct, Ms. Braun?
That's correct.
All right. Any comments from councillors regarding item number 8? Any questions, Councillor Ollie?
Sorry, I noticed that they're taking down some of the previous signs.
Yes.
All along Victoria. Is there, when will the new ones be going?
Okay, Ms. Braun, any comment about when we feel that the new signage will be installed along Victoria?
I would refer that question to Director Black, who's leading the wayfinding signage strategy.
Okay. Mr. Black, are you still on the call?
I am. Thank you, Your Worship. The signs on Victoria have been taken down and been transported to Vancouver to our sign contractor's warehouse, and they're currently being refabricated and rebuilt, and they'll be coming back up here August, September for replacement in the same locations.
Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Ryan?
Yes, were we making any, was the city, when they were renting it out that space to commercial space, were they generating any revenue from that?
Ms. Braun, any comment about generation of revenue previously?
There was revenue generated from that program previously, but as part of the discussion with the wayfinding program, it was decided to move to a wayfinding strategy that does not include commercials for private businesses, in essence. But Cindy could, Floyd could speak to that as well about the revenue stream.
I think Ms. McCabe actually would like to speak to it.
Sorry.
Through your worship, the revenue stream was not a significant one. On average, it was about $10,000 a year for the fees.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up with that, Councillor Ryan?
No, but I have in previous council decision-making around wayfinding been opposed to it, and I continue to be opposed to it, so it won't be regardless.
All right, thank you. Councillor Elliott?
So this decision on the wayfind was direct, it's a direct result of the tourism board's just activities and fundraising, is that right? So there isn't a cost to us.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
So just want to clear to the public that it's not costing anything in the tax dollars.
That's correct. All right. Any further comments on the motion, Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Yeah, I was just wondering what Councillor Ryan just did, if you can explain a little bit, because I wasn't here in some of the earlier discussions.
Yeah, to me, the project, I think some components are really great, but when I think about some other tourist destinations and you go there and it seems like all these signs are really wonderfully matchy, it to me speaks as though the town is prioritizing the tourist over the resident. And I think it takes away some of the charm that makes a place an interesting place to visit in the first first instance. And they're just really expensive. And I don't know that that's a good use of that money, even if, we can't spend it on fixing the roads.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ryan. Interesting, it sort of reflects some of my concerns as well. And just a point on funds, that it's not local tax dollars, but this is money that goes into our community that could be put into something else that might have been tax dollars. So I'll always tend to correct that kind of what I think is flawed logic, but it's very, very common. So it's saying we'll hear that we got a grant, so it's not costing. It's not local tax dollars. But so getting back on the sign, so on this policy then specifically, Councillor Ryan, do you see this as, like if we voted against this, then the Victoria Road signage policy would stay in place then, I'm assuming? And would that, specifically on this aspect of the whole signage, the wayfinding thing, would that be better?
That's how I understand what this policy is meant to do, is to allow the wayfinding strategy to replace what exists right now. So that's why.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor,
I think there was an outside consultant that came in and talked about imaging, branding, how to be a leader in tourism world. And I think they made some clear recommendations about cleaning up our congested signage and improving our image and making really a statement about Revelstoke. And that was what culminated in this decision to go after the brand and go after the new signs, go after, get rid of all the congestion. Let's make it clean. Now that was what came in from using the tax dollars from the tourism people who are visiting our town. So if you have second thoughts at this stage, we're disregarding a lot of work that's been put in to get to this point.
Yeah.
So that's my take. And we can have a debate about the value of marketing and branding, and we can talk about tax dollar and what our future might hold. But that's another issue. So maybe I don't want to go into.
No, that's a really good point, and I don't mean to undermine the work and the quality of work that's being done, because I think it is, like, obviously the people who put this proposal forward have done a tremendous amount of work and know what they're doing. It just seems like a very bold statement for a town that I think usually is so welcoming because it's unique in that it doesn't look like Banff or Jasper or whatever. And so, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to continue to vote against the wayfinding strategies, but this one seems like one where there could actually be some impact. But
in many ways, this could be aspiration. We want to be bold. I'd say go after bold. That's me. That's what I would do. So anyway, we would take that.
any further comments on the motion on the table? I will then ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Ryan is opposed. Balance of council in favor. Motion is passed. Someone put item 11A2 on the table, please. Councillor Charlotte.
An Economic Opportunity Fund Policy CED-2 be rescinded.
Seconder for that motion, please. I will then second that motion. And Ms. Braun, any comments on that policy?
Through your worship, just to say that we have had conversations with CSRD administrative staff and our own corporate admin staff to try and clarify and align our policies and procedures better. This policy that was developed years before I was on board is not consistent with the CSRD. And in fact, it didn't make it to the CSRD for approval. So it's in conflict right now with the way that we've been working with them to submit EOF applications for approval and consideration. So we just wanted to take it off the books and in turn develop a procedure that'll meet the needs of both corporate admin for the city and the CSRD. That'll be more consistent.
Great, thank you for that comment. Any comments or concerns? Councillor Charlotte.
I just want to comment, thank you for taking something off the books. I think it's really easy to add new bylaws and add new policies, and it's important to go through and clear out some of the old ones that cause grief, like this one obviously is. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Any further comments from councillors? Seeing none, I will ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Braun. We're going to move on to item 11B, economic development, referral of COVID-19 restart funds. And so let's put the item number 1A on the table, please. Councillor Ryan, thank you.
That an expenditure of $20,000 be approved for the following: $10,000 provided to community connections for the emergency situational fund to be made available for clients experiencing immediate short-term needs related to the impact of COVID, and $10,000 provided to the Child Care Resource Center for the emergency child care fund to be made available for clients unable to meet immediate child care service costs related to COVID and or their re-entry to the workforce.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Charlotte. Mr. Matheson, do we want to do these individually as far as voting?
Which council's comfortable grouping.
Okay, good.
It's only if there's a problem.
All right, good. Thank you for that. Any comments from councillors? Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I was wondering where the number came from.
Ms. Braun, any comment on that? That came from Social Development Committee. Is that not correct?
Through your worship, the amount that we put forward was just meant to be an interim amount that would allow both of these agencies to meet their clients, residents' short-term emergency needs. But certainly it is something that we will be revisiting, looking at some longer-term proposals to help agencies better serve that population, as well as covering their own budget shortfalls or impacted by COVID. So that would be coming forward for discussion again later in the summer through Director McCabe. So that amount was just basically a number that we thought would help them restore funds to both of those funds that would see them through some of the immediate needs.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ryan, does that answer your question?
Yes, and so those funds, are there versions of them that currently exist that the need is greater now because of COVID, or are these new funds completely?
Ms. Braun.
I think I'll actually defer to Taha Atea, our Community Development Coordinator. He's been doing the work behind the scenes with both of the organizations and with Ms. McCabe.
Okay, Taha, are you on the call?
I am, yeah. And yeah, through to council, the funds that exist in the community serve more specific needs. There are housing funds that house people who are in need of shelter during colder months. There are really specific funds that exist for use of that sort, but nothing of the sort that's kind of an emergency situational fund. Or an emergency childcare fund. Usually, if so, in the situational sort of category, there are funds that sometimes get put through from donors, such as like community donors, like the community the RCU, the credit union, and in the childcare resource funds for emergency childcare. Sometimes the society itself will assist families out, but both those needs have grown, so that's why these have been suggested.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ryan, any further comment?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's great that we could make that motion, and then I'm excited to talk about part 2 as well.
Okay, Councillor Chalet, you have a comment or question?
Just to clarify whether these funds are existing funds already being administered, or if these are new funds that we are setting up.
Ms. Brown?
I believe they are existing funds that have been put together on an ad hoc basis with different funding donors and funding revenue.
Are you asking about the city's funds?
We'll just the name of the emergency situational fund and the emergency child care fund. The report talks about the establishment of these 2 funds, but then the conversation, it sounds like there's other partners involved and they might already be existing.
I can clarify to that.
Okay, go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
So there are similar funds that meet those needs, but there are no existing funds of the sort that we're currently talking about. So these current proposals would be new funds that would meet that need. That existing need.
All right, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Charlotte?
It does, and I'm grateful that this is a possibility that we can fill some of those gaps for when the wrong checkbox is not checked and someone falls through. So thank you for putting this together.
Councillor Elliott?
Maybe my question is this something we're just creating, or was there an express need? Wasn't identified? Where did this come from? We just had money that we put into it because we have it, or what is the need in our community?
Hey, Taha, I'm going to ask you to weigh in. I believe there is a need here, and it came through social development, so if you could just weigh in, please.
Yeah, so that need's been spoken to in the April 2021 update, and that was given to the committee of the whole, and later to council at the time that this was referred to the social development committee. So the need has been studied and has been discussed at social development committee and various other community meetings. Just the note that the vulnerable population has been expanded. And the way that you can observe that is that food bank line growing, or those really the pain points are becoming more of a visible concern.
Great, thank you for that. Any further comment, Councillor Elliott? So there's definitely a need here, and they're addressing these needs.
We turned down an emergency shelter because we had to build it and they would come. Did we not? We did the United Church. We denied them access to an emergency shelter in their building because of the fear. Put it and established it, people would use it.
I think that was part of it, but there was community in the area that didn't want this going forward.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, I don't know how tight the social network is. Are people falling through the cracks? Because I don't know, if you need emergency childcare, the existing shelter won't turn you away. All right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, so Councillor Chalette, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah. As much as there is a bottom stopgap, this is going to help, in my understanding of it, and Taha, fill me in if I'm not explaining this right, but the bottom level is an emergency situation that, yes, no child is going to be out on the street. However, that mom can't return to work. It's not good enough to help her get back to work. And so these funds, the conversation and the reports that I was reading is that this is going to fill the gap between the bottom level of, no, you're not going to go on the street, but you don't have solid childcare. There's a whole range in between there that this is going to start helping to fill. Does that make sense?
It's more of a stopgap measure and a hand up. Is that not correct? So Tom, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that. Am I explaining that, or Councillor Chalette explaining that correctly?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with both of your characterizations. It's a stopgap that when more funds from a family's kind of savings or from their monthly income or their from their funds go to those core needs like housing or food, then it takes less to rock the boat and to put them in an emergency situation, and that's what it's coming through from service providers.
All right, thank you. Councillor Ryan, did you have a comment before I go to Councillor Chalette?
Just, I think too, what I'm hearing in reading in that report is that there were funds that were donations on kind of an ad hoc basis, but nothing consistent. And now that the need has grown, there's nowhere to grab from. So It's becoming, more and more difficult to provide that emergency support.
Great. Councillor Chalette.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that too, is that the bridging of the gap between the emergency support and filling the gaps until those other funds can be accessed. Because sometimes there's a delay, sometimes you have to be approved first, and this would help cover those 2 weeks. I don't think these are large expenditures that will fix all of our problems by any means, but if it helps bridge the gap for more of our residents, more of our families, and more of our employees, I think that's a win.
Just maybe, I guess I don't like painting Revelstoke as a needy or because I think overall we have a good social network of protection for in a community this size. Just generally, we have a good support mechanism throughout. I talked to someone who works in the social work realm. They say it's generally pretty quiet on the child welfare and the domestic. A lot of the big social problems that are in place in Vernon or other communities. So we're very fortunate here, and I guess we're in a fortunate position to be able to allocate more funds to these things. But I just want to be careful. We're not just creating something that's not.
Yeah, I don't believe we're spending money just for the sake of spending money. This is a desire in the community, and there seems to be a need, and Taha has nailed that need down. And so working with community economic development, utilizing these funds is definitely going to be a positive going forward. And it will be that catch, that stopgap for those who need it. So I believe this is a positive. It's just not spending money because we have money to spend. Councillor Ryan.
And one other point too is I think it's important to note that the COVID piece is specific to why we are using the money that we have from the federal government for this purpose. Or is it the province?
Yep.
Province. Anyways, the restart funds that we received, because it's COVID specific, right? So when you think about how those funds are going to be allocated, do you want to help the people that were most affected, or do you want to just put it towards operational costs in 2024? Because that's the alternative.
I would suggest that a lot of businesses in town are pretty upset with the COVID allocation of funds because they can't get workers anymore. So because they're so dependent on the extra money that's available from the COVID response. So it's a tricky.
Yeah, but also part of that same complex problem is that maybe those people can't find housing, and maybe they can't support themselves in other ways, and maybe this might be able to help.
Absolutely. So it's a way to move forward, and I'm happy to see this. Any further comment on the motion on the table? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11B2. Someone want to put that on the table? Councillor Ryan.
That community economic development staff work in collaboration with the Director of Finance to explore additional options for organizations and the community to respond to ongoing budget shortfalls related to the impact of COVID and to long-term needs of the community to build capacity and resilience in the social sector in the wake of the pandemic.
Second for the motion, Councillor Sherlett. Discussion on the motion, Councillor Sherlett.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, this is, I think the meat of it is that our community, the authenticity and the amazingness of our community is driven by nonprofit organizations. And each has been impacted by COVID in a slightly different way. So I'm looking forward to hearing what comes back for this so that we can make sure that we keep those nonprofits strong and keep that fabric of our community going through this and coming out the other side.
Great, thank you for that. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I was curious under the third bullet point about building capacity and resilience in the social sector, and then talking about support for childcare education. I don't know if Ms. Braun or Taha has any heard of this happening in any municipalities, but I wonder, like the early childhood education workers are very difficult to come by and the wages aren't very high. Has any community tried like topping up that wage? Because I know the city does that, right? Or is it the province?
I think the province is doing that, and so there's talk now that the province may be bringing that up with it by $2 or something an hour. Do you have further comment on that?
Just that, yeah, I think there was a $2 to $4 top up. I believe there was discussion about it being made permanent. I'm not sure if that has been or not. Maybe Taha could answer that question.
Okay, Taha, do you have comments on the top up for childcare?
Yep, there are some pretty significant changes facing the childcare sector, and especially when the current policies are being processed of adding or moving childcare to the educational, the Ministry of Education. So there is quite a bit coming down the pipeline in terms of childcare, developing childcare, and that point was there to highlight that there community-specific needs that we could address to further bolster those changes.
Yeah, I would just be interested as part of this resolution, I imagine will pass hopefully, that be explored, because I know that Revelstoke has a higher average of young families than most communities. So this is something that's going to continue to be a challenge as more and more families continue to move here, just proportionate to other municipalities. I did have another question, but if somebody else has something.
Any other comments, councillors?
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
So for Ms. McCabe, I was wondering, because it says in the report that the planning effort will require direction from council. The funds that haven't been assigned to operational shortfalls from COVID, what is the balance of that?
Through your worship, I don't have that balance handy at this time. We are working on the report, though, to bring forward to council so that we can report out and get council's approval and input into where the money will be spent, and that should be coming forward in August.
Okay, so is the idea then that at that point we would provide additional input, or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if this motion gets approved as written, then when is the next time that council hears back about that?
That'll be in August, Ms. McCabe, Ms. Braun?
Through your worship, I think, providing that direction gives us the ability to task Taha with going forward and talking with different organizations, doing his due diligence, doing some background comparisons to other communities, seeing what's out there, what best practices we can build on. There may be further reports coming forward as part of the social or economic recovery task force, but decisions will wait until Director McCabe is bringing forward a full package for your consideration.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Are you comfortable with that? So they're going to go into the community, see what's required in the community, and then they'll bring a report back to us with suggestions on how money is spent.
But how do they know what to ask if we don't assign any kind of number to it? Is that sort of like, I'm just trying to figure out what the order is. Do we wait until August to hear back from Ms. McCabe? Because those funds were already, I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but we received a report that said, these were the, we have $2 million. This is what we expect the COVID surpluses or whatever, surpluses for COVID were shortfalls, I guess. And then the proposed ones for 2021 and then the balance remaining. And that number exists.
Yeah, like, Ms. McCabe's got her hand up, so let's see what she has to say. Ms. McCabe?
Thanks. Through your worship, Councillor Ryan, that amount hasn't changed at this point. The number is still what we're working on. And so, yes, I'll bring forward a report, get your input. And at that point, part of it will be getting input as well as to what kind of amounts for additional resources could be made available for what Ms. Braun and is working on.
Sorry, I just don't, I don't understand.
Well, she's basically saying, so Council Palmer, she's basically saying they want to put a report together with what they see the community is asking for as far as funds, and then come back to council and say, okay, this is what we think is going to be appropriate for the community. This is what we're hearing from the community. We now want council to give direction. Do you want us to do this? Or do we need to direct other funds in another direction?
I see. So first going out to social organizations to say what is the need, and then have the report come back and say this is what we need to meet that need. Are you interested in saying yes to that? And then council looks at that and is able to weigh it out with the report in August that says this is how much is available. Okay.
Just confirming that, Ms. Braun, that's correct.
That is correct. I think the intent is to give time for the organizations to identify what the impacts of COVID have been on their operations, as well as city departments, to figure out what the impacts have been on our different departments. And once we have all that information together, then it'll be up to council to help us set priorities.
All right, thank you. Councillor Palmer, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I think Councillor Elliott maybe.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess further to Councillor Ryan, so it's like sort of like the chicken and egg problem.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And because these organizations, I'm hearing loud and clear the accommodation people as well, that they're in this sort of crisis situation as well, the tourism stuff. So there's more than just the social stuff. There's all these other things that are happening that have a direct impact back to social issues. And so I think one of the risks that we have, if we're not prudent on how we're managing the communications, that these funds can get squandered pretty quickly, just sort of get diluted all over the place. So I think it is a difficult question. So that's my comments. I'm just trying to.
Well, I think having the report come back from the various community and from our departments as to where we're at with that will give us an idea of where we need to go. That doesn't mean that we as council can't hear what the community is saying as well and weigh in with our decisions regarding that. So, Councillor White.
Yeah, I'm sort of in line with Tim. I think the social elements in our town will speak up if there's a need, like the community connection, the food bank, the women's shelter, all these things.
Speaking.
Yeah, so if they're speaking up, great. And I'm saying, you know, what really is really dry, you come, when you're strong, when your economy is strong, you're able to distribute more, right? If you're strong, you're able to give more. And I think we really should think about the retail sector, the hotel, the tourism. What do they need to get to recover? Right now, I can tell you employees are the biggest issue. What are the obstacles of getting employees in our town? And I say, we better address that. I would put more money into getting, Filipinos here, or people from Mexico, or wherever, to get people to work in our community, in the various restaurants, in the various hotels. And I say, what steps can we take to support our business in the commercial side?
Ms. Brown has her hand up. Ms. Brown.
Just further to Councillor Elliott's point, yes, there is actually, we're very aware of some of the pressing economic issues affecting businesses, such as the labor supply shortages. We actually have prepared a discussion paper on that issue. We'll be bringing it forward later in the next month, probably. It's a systemic problem, and it's very hard to differentiate how or to what extent the pandemic has made it worse, but there are some things we could be doing differently, or working together with our partners at the Business and Visitor Information Center to try and address those systemic structural problems. So that's what I talked about when I said that we may be coming back with more reports from the Recovery Task Force on what we can be doing to mitigate those concerns. But essentially, that's about the only way we can actually help businesses directly. We're not able to, through the Municipal Act, to actually assist businesses.
Yeah, it's about setting things in process to assist businesses. It's not assisting businesses directly, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I get that. I said we should be inventive and creative and find ways. Maybe there's a new approach. The bylaws are framed this way. Let's find a way to work around it. Let's explore that, and that's probably where I'm going.
Sure, and I appreciate that. In that conversation at this table, will be kind of give direction to our staff as to what we think we should be seeing bringing forward. So your comments are heard. Councillor Gillette and Councillor.
Yeah, just a quick comment that we are well poised for this conversation. We did a very robust labor market study back when it feels like ages ago, but I don't think it was that far long ago. It was with Alan Mason, was still
2014.
2014, that was when we did it. Because I remember sitting at that table as a business owner from the Chamber of Commerce and looking at all the reasons why we were going to be facing a labor shortage in the coming years. And here we are, and it is slapping us in the face. So we already knew this was coming. There were some ideas posed, some great ideas posed, and maybe now with the changing variables and the changing appetite because of the pandemic, hopefully we can do something that actually makes this community robust for our businesses to continue operating, to have an employee, a labor force that is happy to come to work, is excited to come to work, and can enjoy their life in our community at the same time.
Great, thank you. Okay, I want to get back to the motion on the table. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah.
Just one quick, I understand that it's been talked about for too long.
Yeah.
My take is let's just get something done because it's been far too long.
This looks like we might actually have some funding to do something. So
very good. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's great to hear that there's a report coming forward, and it's important to look at that side of the equation for sure. Because that's a good point that when the businesses are doing well, there's more wealth to distribute. But I think it's important to remember that works in reverse. And when things are bad, it's proportionately much worse for the people at the bottom. And so that's just what this conversation is, not saying that all this balance of funds is going to be going to the social sector. It's just a good conversation to acknowledge, like, it's good that we're going to go out there, see what the need is, and then make decisions. So I feel like it sounds like we're doing it in the right order.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I agree. Any further comments, councillors? Motion on the table. Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Going to move on now to Development Services Road Naming Application. Ms. Brown, you or Ms. Wade, you want to weigh in at all, or are you okay with us putting the motion on the table?
Your worship, I'm okay with you putting the motion on the table.
All right. Someone want to make this motion for us, please? Councillor Charlotte.
That the name Williamsgate Lane be authorized for the dedication of a new public roadway required as part of sub 2019-04, located at Lot A, Section 22, Township 23, Range 2, west of the 6th Meridian, Kootenai District Plan 14576, except parts included in Plans 14577, NEP 22077, and NEP 22528 at 1160 Newlands Road.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Ryan. Any discussion on the motion? I think, so for me personally, I knew, we knew him as Billy McKinnon. So he owned this property up there. His family has been instrumental in a lot of things. Billy was very quiet during his life. He was a doer. He actually did a lot of work in our community as a contractor. Very, very nice man. And it's his son and his brother that are carrying on this development with Jim Holdings. So I'm definitely in favor of this. I think it's an appropriate way to show legacy for a man who cared so much for our community. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to engineering. Annual operating agreement with BC Transit. Someone put that motion on the table, please. Councillor Charlotte.
That the annual operating agreement with BC Transit to cost share the provision of transit services in the community for 2021-22 be approved, and that the Chief Administrative Officer and the Mayor be authorized to sign the AOA for 2021-2022.
Second for the motion, Councillor Palmer. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I will vote in support of this because we need to move ahead. But again, I'll repeat that I really think that we need to relook on how we're providing transit in a much more thorough, in-depth way. We've gone through the motions again, and every time I see the bus going by empty, it just really irritates me from environmental, economic, social reasons. We're failing in a big way there. But meanwhile, we need to keep this contract going.
Great, thank you for that comment. I think I will agree with you on that, and we discussed that with the BC Transit Committee of the Whole, and we look at forward. Definitely, we have to come up with a better way, and so I'm definitely supportive of this. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Elliott.
So this is like thorn. Just keeps this thing is killing us. I mean, I watched that thing at $40 or $30 a ride. And you get on it twice, and they go from the hospital, and there's 10 guys that use it. And I'm saying, this is insane. And it's been insane for the last 5 years. It's gone terribly worse than last 2 years. It's ran continuously during the COVID time when there wasn't a single on it. They just ran the bus, and there's no response, no common sense to the endeavor. And I'm just baffled how we can continue to throw money in. And my worry is to sign another year contract. We just accept it in. We just allow this thing to fester.
Well, I think that during your presentation, I believe I heard council loud and clear that things need to be changed. And they gave some options. They may not be perfect options, but we need to do something.
I guess it goes back. We've had this conversation 3 years ago. Of course. And we're still 3 years in. We're doing it again, signing another year-long contract. And I say maybe not signing. And that'll force the issue. October we'll have a solution. I will pay an extra rate, but by October let's have a solution.
Okay, that's your point, Councilor Palmer.
So through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, valid points. Are we willing to be disruptive. So say if we kill this, then council's got some work, some really serious work to do. And that kind of disruptive thing can make changes, rapid changes. I'm just not seeing the appetite right now. But if you have a solution there saying in willingness to go, well, you can convince me to vote against this.
Maybe let's find a solution. Let's explore it. We haven't really looked. Why can't we get a contract like what was it? Resort shuttle operator, Ryan Rowe. Could we not say, listen, put a van on the road and say cover the transportation for the interim for 3 months until we get it ready to sign a valid, robust contract with transit? I mean, why not? I said, it doesn't make sense the way we're running right now, and we sign another year contract. There's no real pressure to get the thing resolved.
That's for sure.
As much as I appreciate the idea of disruption as a way to not enable old ways of doing things, I hate the line, this is the way we've always done it. Drives me nuts too. So I can empathize with the idea of the thorn in the side. And the environmental impact is definitely a thing, we'll say. On the other hand, I think that the people most affected by the bus and the transit system are the social sector clients. And those folks have enough on their plate right now. So it would not just be our work that would be getting done, it would also be putting more work on those. And that I don't think I'm willing to do.
We could create our own dial-up cab.
Yeah.
And say, you want to ride? Dial this number.
We could. My concern is what would fall off the table. We've set quite a few priorities for our team as it stands, and those are all very important priorities.
Maybe just give it to the economic development or someone or social or someone who is fully aware of their needs in that social network. Hey, is this bylaws? Could we create something that says, I get elderly to the hospital? Call a cab and we'll get you there. Whatever you want to do.
I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Elliott. I don't think there's capacity within our community, or definitely within our staff and even our contract staff to take that on right away. And so by having this backup system that allows us to at least look at it, I believe BC Transit has heard us. They know that we want to make some changes. They know that they need to make some changes to continue to be viable. I think that approving this is the best way forward at this point in time. I'm not saying you're wrong. It just be at this point in time, that's where I'm at. I'm going to ask Mr. Black, do you want to weigh in on this at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. And to Councillor Elliott, we as staff have heard from you in no uncertain terms that change is needed to address ridership in the community, and we are making those efforts and are in discussions with BC Transit, the mountain shuttle provider, and are looking to ways to integrate, modify the system such that we can improve our ridership. And I know I keep going back to the transportation master plan, and you please give me the 6 months. Give me 6 months here to come up with a plan that will be part of the master plan that will make active transportation and bus transit an integral part of our long-term transportation system. It's not something that we can quickly make changes without looking at all of the other components, where the stops are, where the needs are, who the users are, where the trail networks, and are those convenient to the bus stops? Can we get bikes on our buses? How do we put skiers and snowboarders on the BC Transit buses in addition to the shuttles? So there's multiple questions, a multitude of questions that are on the table, and I ask that you give me the time to come back to you with the transportation master plan and considerations. We will focus very heavily on that alternative transportation and not just the vehicle cars. to make our system unique and viable for the long term. Unfortunately, it does take time and it needs to be integrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Mr. Matheson, you have a comment?
Your Worship, I think Mr. Black summed it up really well. I think there is a capacity problem. It's not a small thing. I understand council's frustration. City manager in 12 years, I listened to exactly your comment every year at budget time in the city of Kelowna over the same issues of empty buses on certain routes and frustration. I think if there wasn't, in fact, the abilities of the master plan and the desire of Mr. Black to work within his means to try to address that, then you may want to look at an alternative. I would share Councillor Shirley's comment about who's going to be, when you stop this, who's the most impacted? Are you willing to live with that impact it may do to employees, likely employees around town? I wouldn't say it's the way we've always done it, because I disrupted things my whole life. But I think that sometimes I also learned that you better not take offense down to why it was put up in the first place. And until council is sure who'd be impacted, you may there's going to be some time. If staff couldn't work on it, I think then you might have more reason to be concerned. But I think staff are going to look at some short-term things. It's still BC Transit, and with all due respect to BC Transit, I have some gray hair over our working relationship. It was mostly good, but they're not easily changed organization, at least we're into the past. So your worship, really, bear with us. I don't think we'd have the capacity to do anything else anyways right now. I think we'd have to go back to council and say, what don't you want staff, particularly Mr. Black, to do next year, who's pretty short staffed right now.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Matheson. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So I went from the beginning to say that I was going to vote in favor. Councillor Elliott convinced me that I should vote against it. Councillor Chalette put me in a sort of, first keeping against it, but then sort of pulled me back. Councillor Ryan has had some interesting stuff. So I actually, at this point, I think I'm going to vote against it because it creates that urgency. The risk is that we don't go ahead. If it's sort of like Councillor Elliott, it looks like to me that Councillor Elliott's going to vote against this. It looks like I might. So it looks like a 3-2 split. A comment on Mr. Black's, so 6 months, that beginning of December before Christmas. Just a note, that's 6 months. And so I think we need to really make at some point a disruptive decision to do something. And I will reiterate, our bus does not make environmental sense. It's really bad. It's an empty bus going round and round, sometimes going past it. It doesn't make economic sense. A round trip of $40 subsidized by the taxpayer does not make economic sense. It doesn't make social sense. It doesn't serve the needs of this of anybody. That's why it's not used. It doesn't actually serve those social needs. I firmly believe that we could have a transit system made in Revelstoke that makes environmental sense, makes economic sense, and gives way better service to everybody in the community, especially those in need. So that's just my comment, and I'll see how I vote.
All right. Any further comments?
So if we do agree to a transit contract, how fluid are they? If we sign a year contract or this much money is going to be allocated for these number of buses, this money transit expenditure, how are we tied to that contract for a year? So basically, Mr. Black needs 6 months to revise it. We've signed a contract for a year, so it won't be effectively 6 months. We'll get it changed. It'll be a year. We'll get it changed.
Mr. Black, comment about that. My understanding from seeing what BC Transit had kind of tried to put in place, or moving routes around, that sort of thing, that they are fluid to some extent, but I want to hear from you.
Thank you, Your Worship. BC Transit is, to its best ability, tries to accommodate the needs of the community under their provincial guidelines. Can we make changes to the system if we have a plan that makes sense, and the timing of the routes, the locations of the stops, the perceived benefit are all things that we can address with BC Transit. Can we make changes mid-year? Absolutely. It costs money, but we also need to be certain that we can make these changes that are going to be economic. Blowing up the system is likely going to cause a significant disruption to the community, to those people that need the service. And again, the system is small. It's not so out of line with other small communities. The average price per ride through most of the rural parts of the province are in the mid-20s. We are right in that range. So again, I will say, I hear you. It is a priority. We are discussing this internally, and we will be coming forward with a plan that will be integrated into the Transportation Master Plan, and the communication between RMR, tourism, and the city regarding the two operating systems and integrating them is a high priority for staff. It takes time for us to make those changes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ryan and Councillor Elliott.
Before our term is up, we will have a chance to renegotiate another operating agreement with BC Transit, right?
Mr. Black?
That is correct.
Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, one more shot. They got their notice.
So maybe Mr. Black can explain, what does BC Transit give us right now?
Mr. Black, any comment on that statement?
Not being certain what you're asking
what
for.
benefit does the city get from the relationship with BC Transit?
Well, we have a bus service.
So they pay for the bus? Who owns the bus?
BC Transit owns the bus, is that not correct?
So BC Transit does own the buses, and the province pays about 40+% of our actual costs for the system. So that alone is a huge benefit to the city.
Okay, and that's what I was getting. I mean, there are some benefits to U.S. Transit and having that relationship. My hope is that they are flexible, because everything I've heard about BC Transit is they're not quick response, they're not malleable, they're not innovative, and they're a provincial government run agency. So they're willing to listen, but it's slow, right. And we've had slow for a long time. Let's finally do something. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Any further comment, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just for clarity, I will be voting in support of the motion. However, I will also be putting a motion on the table immediately after the council review the transit agreement on our for December 1st, 2021.
Great. Any comment? Okay. All right. Any further comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor of supporting this motion is passed unanimously. Mr. Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I move that council commit to review the transit agreement on or before December 1st, 2021. I'll speak to the motion in a second.
Okay, second for the motion, Councillor Elliott. You can speak to the motion, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So further to Councillor Ryan's earlier comments about we have another opportunity to look at this agreement. If we don't do something well in advance of that, what will happen is we'll just play this same scenario that's been played year after year after year. And so that's the purpose, is all it's going to do is, what I expect to see is the contract on the council meeting that's near that time, and it'll spark the conversation again.
Perfect. Thank you for that comment. Any further comments, Councillor Sherlock?
I really appreciate the timeframe that this puts on this conversation, because I agree. I think it needs to be put back on the agenda. We do need to have a conversation outside of the renewal of the contract. I think we have been having that conversation ongoing, but this also helps light a fire. I think BC Transit's already dealing with what does transit look like after this pandemic. They're in a lot of disruption right now, and if we send a very strong message that we want to be a partner to come out of this with something innovative, hopefully they get the message and we get something super cool by the end of our term.
All right. Any further comments on Councillor Palmer's motion? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Let's move on to engineering asphalt resurfacing award of contract. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me? Councillor Ryan.
The asphalt resurfacing services project be awarded to Terrace Construction.
We can't have a motion on the table since.
Yes, you can. So I'm just going to watch you, and you still have a quorum.
You gotta go fast.
Yeah, we still got quorum, so he can go and we'll carry this.
Conversations about dancing at the table, but okay.
Subsidiary company Valley Blacktop in the amount of $1,137,728, excluding applicable taxes.
Second for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Black, do you want to weigh in and make any comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. We've utilized the last two pavement management programs that we've presented to Council, indicating the status of our roads, and Council has directed staff to manage our roads in a better way, and that requires significant funding. We're going to utilize that funding to its greatest amount and keep paving our roads and keeping them suitable for a resort community that we are, while still addressing our local roads and making sure our residents have the best possible transportation system in the city. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that comment. Any comments from councillors? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Black. Moving on to item 11F. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Charlotte.
That the 2020 Statement of Financial Information be approved and that the Mayor and Director of Finance be authorized to execute the same on behalf of the city.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Ryan, do you have a question?
Yeah, what does that mean that the Mayor and Director of Finance be authorized to execute the same?
Once you approve it, it's our job to just sign it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any further comment on that? Seeing none, I'll ask the question, Councillor Elliott or Councillor Palmer, for your benefit. We were talking about statement of financial information being approved. Okay, Councillor Ryan.
What's the point of including that? Why wouldn't we just approve it?
It's legislative. We have to do that. Is that correct?
Okay.
All right. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to communications, Social Development Committee minutes. Anyone have any comments on that?
It was a really good meeting, and we talked a lot about stuff already at this council meeting, but it was great.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Heritage Advisory Commission meetings. Any comment on that? Seeing none, moving on to Engineering Environmental Advisory Committee minutes. Seeing no questions, we're going to move on. Ms. Floyd, Ms. Rousseau, do we have any questions from the press?
No questions from the press, Your Worship.
I would like to move in camera pursuant to section 90.18 and E of the community charter. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Gillette. All in favor? Motion's carried. We're going to take a 3-minute break and then we'll come back in the camera. Thank you.
Thank you. Dancing my chin.